Okay, good afternoon. I mean, this is a conversation and we don't have to make it a bit too tense for the moment.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Particularly, I want us to talk a bit more about you, okay?
Yes.
A little more about you, your motivation, because I've seen you, over the period, the last 6 years, practically, 6 years might be too long, but I think the last 6 years since I came here, you are quite active, progressively, moving from one progressive state to the other, and then, and also having to see you, observing you, and watching your, videos, and also reading your articles on Facebook. I get more interest in you to try to know a little more. What's your motivation? What motivates you? Yeah.
Thank you very much for the opportunity stated on me. And I will say it's like surprise words. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
You asked me a question, what motivates me?
Yeah.
What motivates me is the life I live and the life I choose to live and the life I see ahead of me. These are the first things which motivates me.
Right.
The life I live, the life I see ahead of me, and the life I want to live. And these are the first things that motivates me.
So when you said the life you lead, at least a little bit about the life you lead, and especially whilst we're in Italy, what really gives you the edge to keep. Because I see there's something in your eyes that you want the world to know, not just to know, but also to benefit from what is within.
I will say the word in which you used, benefit from, I think is the key word.
Yeah.
Because I think in everything I do or say, I never claim monopoly of wisdom, but they constitute my opinions. So what I we say they are my key points is what the world can benefit from and what I can benefit back, because sometimes even listening to you I learned a lot. So I would say I was born in Nigeria, that is found in Africa. So during these processes and my traveling and encountering with many peoples and non-Africans and Africans, I noticed that not totally that my ideas are totally wrong, and not totally that I know it all, but there is this thing they call I give to you, you give to me. So even when I stepped into Europe, the first thing I noticed was that we keep on criticizing these people of their atrocities, and of course it is truth, but sometimes we should push down and think, why are they so concerned about us, and why is it we are all humans, as the human race stated that we are all human, but they are always ahead. Of course, which is not up to be, because we claim we have everything, but what is the problem? So what motivates me and what gave me this great energy is that I must, in my own little way, to discover. In order to discover these things, I have to think of the past, the life I have lived in Africa, the life I am seeing here, and the life I'm living here. So these are the things that motivates me and push me to see things different, and sometimes it might not totally be truth and right, but so many people in these comment sessions and having people like you, of course, they will add little contribution to me that we, of course, I will not say change, but that will help me get it a bit proper right.
Okay. That's okay, because of course it talks about your motivation and also what drives you. Of course, the energy is also to see that things are changing in terms of the part of the world that we came from. And then especially when you compare, for example, Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and then compared to even Italy and the rest of Europe, which you have traveled across. How many countries have you traveled across in Europe?
Let me say, in Europe, let me say 3.
Okay. Yes. Specific country?
Italy, I have traveled 99%
all
of
over.
Then Germany, then France.
Okay. And then you've been in Africa, which part of Africa?
I was born there. Then I traveled from let me say, the whole Sahara. I traveled the whole Sahara, Niger to Libya. Then recently I was in Kenya with Professor PLO Lumumba, where I did my internship training for the university training.
Okay, so you have some comparative, observations across this part of also Africa. So then the question becomes, what do you think comparatively, like you said, the atrocities that sometimes we try to raise in terms of what Europeans did to Africans, or in terms of the relationship between Africans and Europeans over the past 500 years, and yet things are progressing with them, and we are not with all the education. So what have you observed around these interactions, Europe, Africa, and then the rest, especially with the minds of the young people that you have interacted more with?
Actually, I will say when I joined the European Scout organization, my main objective was to know how do the European youth function. I stayed 5 years in progress with them, and I was being the only black man among them. Even in the university, in my class, I am still the only black man. The first thing I noticed is that we Africans, we talk too much, and it's not that there is a sense of what to be done, but the problem is that thing, are we doing it, or are we doing it right? That is the first thing I discovered.
Which means we say, but we don't
do. We say things we don't even believe in our heart. We are good in saying, but when it comes to practicalize the things we say, I think our Africanness goes away. That is the first thing I discovered. Yes, and then the second thing I also discovered, we have to be honest with ourselves. Certificate is not a badge of honor to make a civilized nation. Of course, Africa was civilized before they came, but this honesty was to be the best policy, but in Africa, this thing is missing. Some people, 80% of us, claim to be even scholars. They go to church, but inside them is just for self-benefit. Because we have institutions in Africa which were inherited mid-wide by the Europeans. But this institution, how are we managing them? This is a fundamental question which every African must ask themselves. It's not that we don't have institutions, but these institutions, what are they useful, and of what purpose are they? Like you go to my country, Nigeria, there is no sense of securities in their names. The police force, the defense, academic, soldiers, all this, we have them, but what do? You oppress the innocent ones and protect the criminals. These are examples. We have religions which is to be preacher and saying of love and be your brother's keeper, but what do we use them for? These are the things I discovered with them. Like in Siena, our recent city, the oldest church in Siena, I think during the pandemic session, they found out that it's not encouraging and it's not going well. The church was closed, and it's now the best pizza shop in this place, and it employs 25 people. If you try that in our continent, Africa, you can be called. Yes. So these are some things I begin to think. And you see the education session. How many of our people can go to school willingly from their heart and they say they don't pay bribes to obtain certificates? But when they talk about people who went to school, you see somebody claim a badge of honor, I'm engineer David, but they can't even build a bridge. You see somebody saying, I graduated from so and so, but honestly, how did you acquire this certificate? You see somebody will tell you, I am this, but you keep on, even in Kenya recently, you see the bridges, the stadiums are being built by the Chinese, but our engineers are there. The only place you know they are engineer when you see funerals and marriages, they call you engineer David, engineer so. These are some things, they might not necessarily be important, but we should think.
No, they are.
Sometimes these are the mistakes we are making as we inherit everything. Everything the European, the Westerners give to Africa, not everything are totally wrong. But how do we manage those things? Is it not good that democracy have its own definition? like tenures in governance, multi-parties, ideas, many things. These are the definitions. But in Africa, it is a sense of like, you know which ethnicity is more than the other ethnicity. They will tell you, vote for this is our own. But as I said, institutions should be controlled, and what we have it there for should be measured.
You know, like I said, we are only conversing, honestly, and sometimes I don't want to lead the conversation. That's why I try to throw it to you to just come out. But then, if you look at the way we want to look at mindset, as you've said it all within the framework of mindset, and then it comes to the point. Like in South Africa, we are not doing things where we don't do, like you mentioned, with examples. Even learning process, we want to be, ascribed, to a certain position, not by achievement. And so by the time your name is called engineer, so
it gives you a badge of
you cannot even operate, these even things that are already done. You are not able to operate. You are not able to do it well. And so in the end, it comes back to, the fundamentals, So, supposing that, which brings us to leadership, okay, do you think there should be a relationship, okay, with leadership and also honesty? Do you think that leadership in terms of having a role to lead a certain, institutions are politically, institutions are, not just the buildings you see, of course, it's also the laws and regulations that also guide the conduct of the institutional structures. So in the end, we put these two together. So you might say that for the legislature is an institution which also then makes laws for it to be implemented by the executive. But then do you think that when the leaders can control honesty, for which you said the institutions need to be very, very controlled? I don't know if it makes sense with the question. Yeah. Because honesty, if you look at the system here, which you have observed in Europe, you talk about kids, right from the onset, they go through the school systems. They are also taught about how to be even honest to themselves.
Yes.
So sometimes there are things that they will not do, okay? And they see it as a crime. In fact, it's a painful thing to them to tell somebody that you are a thief, you are a criminal, you are a cheat. Within these people that I have identified. But when it comes back to, as we are saying, part of our words, when you tell somebody he's a cheat, he doesn't even feel it. Okay, so in this case, do you think honesty and the institution can work, in a certain way that the law should push people to be honest?
Yes. In the recent past, I won't go deep, but I would like to tell many people who think and who thought and who share the opinion that Africa can work. Let's take, for example, people like Sankara have shown that honesty can make our continent work.
Okay.
People like Kwame Nkrumah, they have shown. People like Lumumba have shown, and so many other leaders. But the problem is that we have shortage. Magufuli recently, just 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But the problem is that we have shortage of these people. And when they goes away, it takes another century for we to get such people. These are the problems. And everything they've done will be destroyed before the new, they call it Magufulism, will come into practice. This is the problem. Like you see Mandela, he showed that it can work. Sankara, Kwame Nkrumah, and these are our founding fathers. But what we should do is that we young Africans, we should gain this enthusiasm, following their footsteps, because we have a lot have been said in Africa, in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Senegal. A lot have been said, but few have been done. This is the problem. We should imitate. We should be fast. We should not let this energy of like, I too, I will use myself as an example, running away. It's not a being honest thing to do as young African. But will you blame me running away from Africa for now?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course.
Will you blame me? Of
can
course.
I even blame you? The question is, can I? Yes. Do I have that?
It's something you can criticize me of, but you can't blame me, because if I am left in Africa, none of our leaders, their children, even stay in that country. In the next 20 years, they are coming back to rule over us again, telling us they have studied in Brigade University, they have studied in this. But if you and I have the opportunity to go away, doing the right thing, even in any arena, in any places we find ourselves, we can bring them back to the continent, giving opportunities and strength to less underprivileged, helping them. I think it will also help the institution, because institution is not just the offices, and institution is also you and I.
Yeah.
Like if you have idea in the mining sectors, in the agricultural sector, go there. Do it well, not for just your benefit, but for the benefit of the society. Go there, cooperate with the Europeans, but in the honest way, which does not bring down the value of Africa, but that will make them cooperate in a honest way, and you give back to the society. Like this, you will see honesty will come into our leadership. Because the problem is that in Africa, I noticed that those who have something to offer have no power, and those who have power have nothing to offer. These are major problems. And you see, with this system, we keep on producing what we don't consume, and we consume what we don't produce. And the country...
I think we'll come to that point of, that's where of economics, but the point of honesty brings us to another point, which is very important, that I would like us to look at. Like I said, conversation, so eventually we might look at it from specific points. But like you said, honesty and the way we put and then do things, of course, it brings us to our African leadership, but also the followers. Because every leader has following. Okay, so if you say you want to be even a president or a district officer or this, there are people that you are going to also play a function over. But you see, just to give you an example, and in this context, so that you can see what I'm trying to talk about. Even recently, two young people, okay, one said that, look, I'm going traveling, and I leave this in charge of you. A certain amount of money would have come to me if I were here, but I'm not here, so collect this money and then use it to keep it in my account for me. This is a very simple
logistics,
some very simple instruction. Okay, with a friend that think that I can trust you, and then this friend comes, and then 3 days later, 4 days later, he collects the money. And then he tells him, oh, something came up, so he used it for himself. And then he begins to beg. Look at this particular thinking. And then we bring it back to our leaders. Okay? The core, the leaders. So from the subject level, a leader sees young people who are themselves cheats. They are dishonest. And then the leader also takes over. Doesn't even know how to bring this people to relate to what is called honesty. So immediately the leader begins to also look at how he can grow. There's that kind of disconnection between how the people who the leader is leading can check to know that this leader is not doing it right because of honesty or dishonesty. And then the leader also sees that everybody who he's leading or she's leading is also not honest. So there's that kind of disjoint, what do you think about these kinds of things?
I think it's a big challenge, because I have seen it in the recent past. A leader who is not honest cannot lead people who are not honest, and people who are not honest cannot go well with.
Oh, good.
Yes, so it's a big problem in Africa. It's a big problem, honestly. But I think we have to first challenge the leaders, because when the people are so oppressed with, they call it stomach infrastructure. You give them no option but to become
stomach infrastructure.
Yes, stomach infrastructure is like a big business. So you see the people, they begin to do what they want to do. Believe me, no matter how wicked or devilish a person is, Nobody wants to kill another just for a bread, but situation costs you that. So we have to first deal with the question of our leadership, to be honest. Because if our leader dare to be honest, I think the majority problems in Africa will be reduced. Because if the state of leadership is not fair, at least just, you give the citizens, you give them no option, no choice, but to become rulers. They become problems. So I think the question of leadership should be the first we have to.
Do you have some ideas about how you think these kinds of the question of leadership needs to be checked? Do you have some few ideas? Of course, like I said, you don't need to be right, but of course,
I think in the recent past, I had opportunity to see some European institutions how they function.
Good.
Like our leader, like the president, they should not have totalism of power, thinking like they knows it all, or they have, like in my country, Nigeria, you see the president, he is the commander-in-chief army, he is the commander of this. So what do you expect from the other followers? So sometimes I think this thing called democracy is nice, but it's too big for Africa. Because we are still backward. So when the president have the 80% of powers, what do? He bestowed to be demigod. So I think there are some institutions, some bodies which have to, like sometimes, who can, like the armed force in Africa, sometimes they should be able to, in a cultured way, in a intelligent way, sometimes they should stop our leaders, telling them this is not right because the citizens are suffering, the people are crying, but not that they use the guns. You see, even in Europe, have you ever heard a gunshot?
No.
But they are the one producing guns. But in Africa, like in Nigeria, gunshots are like a toy, are like what every 5 minutes you. So sometimes we should use these things we inherited, we should use it to control, not to be disturbing the society actually. So I think there is a way we can control our leadership.
I mean, in 5 minutes we will wrap it up.
Okay.
But just to conclude on this point, because there are so many things that I think, just for the introduction of what really your motivations and also what you are thinking in terms of framework. But then we'll come back later to talk more in specific terms about that. So, like I still mentioned this question. I mean, I looked at it personally and I said, well, like for example, as it is Ghana everywhere, once a leader, somebody is appointed into a position of high, interest, immediately the person sees a point to develop his or her political career.
Yes.
Do you understand?
Yes.
The question is, even being a minister is not it's not a career enough. So the person begins to develop some resource, mobilize resources, develop this career. The question then is, at one point, you see that things are not probably being done well within the place that he has to function. Or
because he's busy doing another thing.
Do you understand? So maybe the resources that were meant to take care of the environment in which he or she operates, the resources will also be doing something different. So by the time, maybe after 4 years, you come and then there's nothing there. But this person has become so powerful, strong, that he is able to also go ahead to occupy another position. Of course, yet our people who are also doing the voting in terms of a question of democracy and voting, they vote for such people they think have the resources that come to them. But then they don't check the work that they were doing. What did they do when they were, for example, a minister, a district officer, or whatever position they had? But they only look at the resources the person would have mobilized. So that this connection between the role you are playing now and the role that you hope to play in the future, for which you want to have more resources there, and then leaving the work that you should be doing okay? So that people will come and see that, oh, you gave you this role, you played it very well. So then you have the opportunity to go forward.
You are right.
Not that. But in this case, it is the reverse. The role is not played well. More resources is developed and it goes there. And then when you come to ask, you say you want to tarnish an image. If you want to go and talk about somebody who didn't play the function well, you say, you are tarnishing my image. Because he is looking at the career higher than this. And so anything you say which is, bad about him, he then attacks you and thinks that you are attacking his personality and this one. What do you think about this thing comparative to Nigeria and also other places, even in Europe you have seen?
It's a big problem. I will tell you definitely with the opinions you brought in. It's something, but in Europe recently, I left Nigeria 8 years ago.
Yeah.
But in Europe, they have bodies which bring them into system and they have to pay usually for a mismanaged opportunity. Like you see recently, there was this first minister from Ivory Coast. He is an elected minister here in Italy.
Okay.
Using
recent.
Yes, right. He's called Abubakar Usmaoro.
Okay.
Using young Africans, telling the Europeans we have rights as black people, but just within a month, with the farming collective of a charity home and other things, in his name he bought a house, but telling us he's fighting for Africans' rights. But what do? They suspended him for now in the parliament.
Good.
He's going into many sectors to be interviewed, not that he will be thrown immediately into prison or something, but they have to find.
Check.
Yes. How much did you buy the house?
Where did
How
you
much
get
is your
the
salary?
money?
And they check your annual income rate. And where have you worked? He even liked that he wrote a book. They went to the print where he wrote the book. How many books were being sold and how many of them and how much.
Please,
so doing
emphasize this very well. It's
yes,
very important.
So doing all this calculation, they analyze. Mr. Man, we still give you time. Go and make research. Tell us more when you get the source of your wealth.
Exactly.
Because you see, the easiest way in Africa to get rich is jumping into the political arena. That is what we should learn from the Europeans, and I think we Africans are not learning that part.
This example is very important.
He's an Ivory Coast, but he's a citizen in Italy.
Yeah.
But believe me, he's under
question to find out what's real. How did you
even
get
the house? If at last they find out if 80% of his wealth is not in the house will be taken and be given to the orphanage.
Of
He
course.
will lose everything.
This is exactly the point that
The
I
system
think
we
we
should
have
adopt.
just hit it to
Yes.
the point of leadership and political career.
Yes.
You want to be wealthy, you want to be strong, you want to go further. But how do you mobilize your resources?
Africans don't think about it. That is our major challenge. Even the money he told us he traveled, he do this. They can even go to where you buy the ticket. They check everything. Where you pay your insurance, you pay taxes. If those things are not showing, then it's a big problem. Then you will see in Italy sometimes you see even the money a minister uses in a year. It's the money our just prime minister in Africa used for breakfast. And later we keep on saying Africa is poor. Africa is not poor, just it is badly managed. You see, even the wife, they went to the Instagram, they went to the wife's Instagram, they checked the rings and what it was, the handbag, Gucci she was carrying, what it was. So all those things have to be brought, to be measured, to know the source of this. How did you get
these resources to do this?
Yes.
This is very, very, very important.
So I was so focused following the processes, because sometimes I do get opportunity to also work in the high court. So these processes with this thing they call corruption is something I beginning to get interested, because I know one day it might be useful not just to me but to our continent.
Thank you very much on this note, because this is very important. Unfortunately, the vice versa I am trying to do to talk about a bit about your personality. You know, I didn't start with that. I started with your motivation. But now I want you to tell me about your educational, you know, process. Not necessarily, you know, where you started from, but as at this point, where have you reached and what is your, you know, aspirations in terms of education and application of your knowledge? Just in 2 minutes, and then.
Actually, it was difficult for me because when I came to Italy, I have to study political science or law. But due to the language challenges, I was unable to do much as I expected. But I am a person, I don't do what I like. I do what I like, not what is easy. So I started doing the politics. So I think if God willing, by April I will be graduating from Political Science International Relationship in University of
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I will be graduating, and I also step forward and look into the future that one day, even if not much, at least maybe I will be able to stand right, because I believe so much in Africa more than Nigeria. I mean, I was born in Nigeria, but I wish one day to be able to talk about children's rights in Africa. This is something very important.
Human rights.
Even if it's not human right, but children.
Children, of course, it's the general aspect of human rights.
We, the old one, are failing. Let's bring the children up very well.
How to bring them up in education
And so I am so much fixed about that. And I don't actually know where and when to start it, but I believe much, I said, in Africa, not only in Nigeria, because we are suffering from the same problems.
You are going to start, and I'm sure that, I'm just trying to add it up. I've observed you carefully, of course, and I've realized that there's something that needs to shine out of you, and sometimes you take some of these processes, the conversations, and also the interactions with the right institutions, and I'm sure that you are coming up you will reach there, and then we will all be laughing with you.
Thank you.
Take care of yourself very much.
Thank you very
so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I will be glad if sometimes people like you who have, let me say, gathered much, you have traveled in your own little way. I wish and you will be able to sometimes give this knowledge freely to our young Africans. It will help them a lot. Tell them, because out of 10 people you will tell, I think if it is 2 who gets and takes it, I think it's a resources to Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's why we need your resource.
Thank you very much.